Hi, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. My name's Angela Williamson. I'm Director of Blue Policy and Planning from the Blue Economy Cooperative Research Centre. I'm going to be your host for the next hour as we take you through information on the proposed Bass Strait Aquaculture Research Trial in Commonwealth waters. I have with me my colleague Simon Wilcox, who I'll introduce you to, and also one of our advisors, Sam Ibbott. So Simon, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I work for the Blue Economy CRC. I'm involved in managing the preparation of the information for the proposed trial in Bass Strait, and here to help answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Simon. Sam, over to you.
Hello, Sam Ibbott. I'm a marine scientist who has been engaged by the Blue Economy CRC to help provide some advice about the site and some environmental monitoring parameters and the types of questions that we should be looking to answer as part of this trial. I'm happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sam and Simon. So before we go any further, I wish to pay my respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge traditional owners of the lands that we meet upon. How we're going to spend our next hour is very much going to be focused on taking you through information that's available on the Blue Economy CRC webpage, the Blue Economy Zone webpage, provide you a little bit more detail behind that. And then at the conclusion of that, we're going to take some questions. So if you've got any questions, you just write them down in the Q&A at that point, and we'll be able to go through those. So next slide, please. So where we're going to start is back in 2019, the Blue Economy Cooperative Research Centre was established. It was established under the CRC processes, and it really was a collection of universities, government, industry representatives, and supply chain who were looking to understand better how to support new, emerging, and transitioning industries operate in Australia's ocean estate. In addition to Australia, we also have participants from Singapore, New Zealand, and Europe, as well, as they tackle the same issues or are able to share their experiences as we look at, operating with these new activities in offshore waters. So 2019 was that starting point very much for the CRC. But actually, the conversation about offshore aquaculture in Commonwealth waters started 20 years prior to that. As jurisdictions were wondering who ultimately looks after and governs this particular space. If you look at Commonwealth fisheries, there's a variety of arrangements through the offshore constitutional settlement that allows sometimes states to govern fisheries, and other times it's run by the Commonwealth government, by AFMA. So back in 2019, here you have the opportunity to look at this really important opportunity, this issue, this challenge that was set by many people in the community, and government, and various political parties who were saying, take aquaculture further offshore, or at least look at that in the context of future growth and expansion. That meant in some cases, in some jurisdictions, you had people doing like aquaculture development areas within state waters. And then when it came to Commonwealth waters, the question really came to, okay, well, how do we go about that, and what's that first starting point? So back in 2020 to 2022, there was quite a lot of work happening between the federal government and state government here in Tasmania, where many of us are based, looking at the first aquaculture research trial site in Commonwealth waters. A variety of objectives were set around that, ranging from assessing operational feasibility and suitability. Does it even work here? Does it make sense? Assessing and examining environmental conditions, how to understand, monitor, and mitigate impacts on environment and wildlife, to look at financial and economic viability of operating in these waters and benefits for local communities, to assess impacts on other marine users. In many cases, the ocean estate is quite crowded. There's a lot of people operating in there. So what does that mean? To understand and monitor community sentiment. There's a variety of views out there about aquaculture or new industries going into the ocean estate. And then to look at developing and assessing models for future governance of aquaculture in Commonwealth waters. Should it be governed by the Commonwealth government or states in adjacent, with adjacent waters? Next slide, please. With those objectives in mind, the Blue Economy CRC took on the opportunity of doing Australia's first in-water research trial and demonstration. Where we stand at the moment is we're currently going through approval processes for permitting to actually allow that. Certainly testing what those processes look like. This process allows us to prepare what we believe is best practice, compilation of material to be able to answer really important questions like touched on before around environment, around operational feasibility, and around keeping people safe and keeping shorelines clean and keeping the rest of the marine environment healthy as well. So this particular research trial is going to be delivering that first in-water research demonstration of aquaculture. It's going to develop a handbook of open ocean aquaculture, which is going to capture those annual research trial outcomes. This is a 3-year trial. It's going to be producing a synthesis of the full research trial findings at the conclusion of that 3-year period. 3 years is what's been set out in the Memorandum of Understanding between the federal government and state government against a series of research and operational pillars. It'll compile best practice learnings from this for industry extension. Smart farming database, one of our principles for this research trial is transparency, visual transparency as well. So data, video footage, being able to share what's really going on. What did it look like before? What does it look like during? What does it look like afterwards? An offshore high energy farm carbon footprint assessment. So often you get to work at something new where you're also able to bring in decarbonisation objectives and able to, really understand from the start what that operational profile could look like. Health and safety framework, also a really important component for going further offshore. The advisory on future governance models for aquaculture in Commonwealth waters, and a wealth of research around the Blue Economy research portfolio, so reports and communication material on this particular research trial. And our starting point certainly is that over the last 4 years to 5 years, we've been undertaking a lot of preparatory work, looking at other factors to help us define this trial and ensure that it could be successful, subject to approval. Next slide, please. The trial site itself, which is one of the things that we're consulting on, sits within that black rectangle that you can see there, a dashed rectangle. This particular rectangle is a fisheries arrangement area that was provided by the Commonwealth Government to the Tasmanian Government back in 2022, where they are through an MOU and some regulatory changes, being able to say in this area, the Tasmanian Government can regulate, permit and oversee, monitor for compliance purposes, aquaculture research in accordance with an MOU. So our particular trial site that we're going to take you through today sits within that area that was defined in 2022. There was public consultation that happened at that point as well. And that rectangle you see was originally bigger and it's now shorter. Sitting within that rectangle are 2 rectangles, a red one and a yellow one. The red rectangle was assigned by the government at that time as well as where a trial could potentially happen. And so that was the starting point. So we undertook a variety of environmental baseline characteristics to look at the habitat there, and I'll get Sam to touch on that in a moment. And it became very clear to us that that location was not our preferred site. Sam will take you through what that looks like in a minute. But where we did end up getting is this yellow site. You can see it's north a little bit, so further offshore. It's on an angle which allows for currents and wind and other activities, and it ensures a much safer configuration. And it's a little bit bigger because we're out further and deeper, so mooring structures need to stretch out a little bit further. The proposal for the trial site in this yellow area is for a 3-year research program to look at 2 finfish species, Tasmanian Atlantic salmon and also kingfish. It's a 6-bay mooring grid. We're talking 12 k's north of Burnie. 2 of those pens within that 6-bay mooring grid would be active for the finfish production, and each active pen would stock 15,000 fish each. There's additional space there for opportunities for a submersible pen for seaweed, for shellfish, and the potential further down around co-location of renewable energy generation. Next slide, please. Sam, can you take us through the background behind moving from that red site to the yellow site?
Yeah, certainly, Ange. So as Ange mentioned before, some of the other CRC participants gathered together in just after 2019 and did a much broader sweep of the north coast of Tasmania, from Rocky Cape in the west through to almost the mouth of the Tamar River in the east, and helped gather information around the habitats in Bass Strait right through that area. And they put in a range of equipment to monitor wave height, wave direction, current strengths, velocities, water temperature, a whole range of the physical characteristics of the Bass Strait environment. And out of that came the recommendation that we saw on the last slide, with the black dotted rectangle as the fisheries arrangement area, and a small area, which in this slide is actually the red rectangle down to the lower left. I was engaged to come and find out some more detailed specific information around that site. So we undertook a whole range of multi-beam mapping, sub-bottom profiling, and ultimately some video work at that red rectangle, so the inshore site, which is about 42 to 45 metres. And what we found is that there was quite a lot of rubble and reef there, with a sponge community and quite a lot of fish life. And it raised a few red flags for us, and I had to go back to Ange and say, I don't think that's going to be a suitable site for this trial, unfortunately, because nominally rocky reef is more productive and has a higher conservation value than sediment, so sand or silt or mud. And so I had a different question then about, well, if we can't do it here, where could we do this trial? So I ended up speaking to a range of other users of the marine environment, including some commercial fishermen who had expertise around this area. And they explained to me that historically there'd been a glacier running off the north coast of Tasmania, and it had deposited a range of these rocks at that 40 to 42 metre contour all along the north coast. But once we moved out beyond the 50-metre contour, it was clear sand and mud. So we explored further to the north into what's now the northern yellow rectangle, and tilted it on its side to face the prevailing northwesterly wind, and did a whole range of multi-beam soundings. And we also did sub-bottom profiling and video. And you can see that the two photos on the right, there's a clear difference between the offshore site and some of the inshore site, which is all sand, and also that the reef was on the inshore site. So we settled on this offshore site as a suitable location for the trial. But in some of our investigations, we also discovered that, next slide, please, that the North Coast has been subject to a whole range of industry historically, and that one of these industries, called the Northwest Acid Plant, had made a byproduct called calcine, which they had dumped on these spoil grounds, which were clearly marked on this old chart, which I found in the shed, in a suitcase in the shed of a retired fisherman. And it showed, along with some correspondence, that there'd been a range of contaminants dumped out there. So we had to make sure that the sediment was not, we weren't going to do any harm by disturbing the sediment and unleashing any contaminants. So we did a whole range of grabs of the sediment as well. We looked at the infaunal community, which is the little animals that live in there, the worms and sea urchins and ophiroids and things like that. We looked at the particle size. We looked at a whole range of the health of the sediment, and also looked at what contaminants might be within that sediment from the historical activities. And the good news is that over the past 50 years, since this sort of acid dump had ceased, the nature had prepared itself to some degree, well, to a great degree. I guess the currents in the area and the waves and the little animals burrowing up and down had mobilised any of those contaminants back to a level that everything was considered below the national screening guidelines, which is what we look at. There's a set of guidelines around what would deem something as contaminated and what would just mean it's normal. And so we're very pleased to report that the areas that we tested off Burnie are all back to normal or under the low trigger threshold. So that gave us even more information about a baseline, but also the confidence to report back to the Blue Economy CRC that the offshore site in 55 to 60 metres seems suitable for the trial. It's got deep sediments which are suitable for holding the anchors and holding equipment over, but equally for holding enough biomass of biota to help assimilate any material that comes from the farm, any fish waste or anything like that. So it's a low productive area that is absolutely suitable for the trial. And that's the reason that it's slightly larger, as Ange mentioned, is to fit larger than the initial site, is to fit the deeper water anchor array in, which needs to be spread out a little bit further. So it's not an actual larger trial, it's just a more robust anchoring system in that depth of water. That's it in a nutshell, Ange, I think.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate that, Sam. And it's such a great story of part of research. And it's certainly one of the reasons that the Blue Economy CRC offers value with the introduction or this exploration stage of a new industry or a transition or a shift or a move or entry of new waters. So it's very interesting. Can we just go to the next slide? Okay, fantastic. So Sam's just taken you through what that mooring structure, how we need to make it a little bit bigger. For those who have experience in engineering, you would be familiar with the stick figure kind of picture in front of here. What this is basically showing us is where those anchors are going to be for the moorings, and what that grid looks like. As I touched on earlier, 2 pens will be used for finfish, 2 pens will be used for husbandry. So 1 pen kingfish, 1 pen would be your salmon. And then there's also space there for a submersible pen. Should we wish to trial seaweed, which is similar to what we have undertaken at the mouth of the Derwent in Hobart, we would be undertaking that within one of those pens that allows for a reduction of marine debris likelihood and containment of those particular activities. Next slide, please. Yeah, 2 interesting species here. So Tasmanian salmon certainly has Atlantic salmon has a footprint already in the Tasmanian marine estate and marine finfish farming estate. And kingfish is in operation in South Australia, has been in operation in Western Australia before in the marine context, and then also some trials in New South Wales. So this will be the first time that comes into Commonwealth waters and first time adjacent to the Tasmanian system. So that certainly means that we've got a lot of questions around biosecurity and ethics as we go through those approval processes in addition to the permit applications that we're asking for. Next slide, please. A lot of people often ask, well, what is that footprint? What does traffic look like? How far away is this? How frequent do these vessels work? So the footprint that for the activity, for the profile, is a FarmWorks vessel daily, which is about 7 to 10 metre vessel. We have a dive boat, which will be going weekly, also about a 7 to 10 metre vessel. A works barge, which will be fortnightly. And then there's a potential there, we're seeking approval for a wellboat. However, it's really unlikely we'll actually be using a wellboat for those particular activities. Our intention is to use ports in the northwest with a focus on Burnie and exploring some other options as well that sit around that. Next slide, please. So monitoring is a really important part of this. It's certainly something that came back from a lot of questions that the community were asking when the original consultation was underway. And off the back of our consultation we've done to date as well, monitoring has been quite central. So Sam, I'm going to ask you to take us through the monitoring program that you'll be undertaking on behalf of this study.
Okay, thanks, Ange. So there's a few components to the monitoring program. One was this initial site investigation, I guess, because it's really important for us and any activity like this to understand that it's a question of site and location. So if we've chosen the site, scale and location, or scale and site. So if we've chosen the site correctly, which we're fairly confident it's got all the attributes we're after for this trial, then we can build a monitoring program around that to answer some of the questions that we're after. The monitoring program involves collecting a range of information about the sensitive receptors, so the water column, the water quality in the area, the sediments, how they may change through the course of the trial, and we start collecting that information prior to the activity being undertaken. So we're building up some information about what it's like while there's nothing there. As the activity, the infrastructure goes in and is stocked with fish, then we set up a monitoring program with a range of sites close to the lease. and then at increasing distances from the lease in what we call the dispersion pathways. So to the east and west, where we might expect to pick up any change or any impact. And we're doing that on a monthly scale. We'll be monitoring the water quality and a range of the sediments, and that's what we expect would be part of our compliance for the state or the federal government. Would be interested to know what sort of environmental impact this trial will be having on those sensitive receptors. In addition, the monitoring program provides the opportunity to answer lots and lots of questions which might be important for other sites, so other aquaculture development, or even a range of developments, I guess, in the in Commonwealth waters. So we're going to have some information gathered around the robust nature of the equipment, so a durability trial. We're also looking at having some cameras topsides and below, so that there could be some real-time streaming of what's going on. We can have a look at seabird interactions, perhaps marine mammals, and we can also look at a range of things which the community are bringing to us as their questions. So it's not just about the things that we need to understand, but there are some questions that the community are interested in as well. And as we've been doing these sessions and others face-to-face, people have brought up things around penguin movements, around hydrodynamic modelling, around particulate moving, around marine debris. And so these are the types of things which we're building into an adaptive monitoring program as well. So we've got a regulatory monitoring program, and we have an adaptive monitoring program to try and pick up a range of questions. And that'll run for the course of the trial, the 3 years. And at the culmination of that, there's a whole decommissioning piece as well, which is making sure that we have an audit of every piece of material that's been put into the site, and that it all comes out. So we can tick off that each of the pieces of material and infrastructure that's gone in has come out. And then there's a decommissioning survey as well, which will be able to check the sediments, check the site, and compare that to the baseline condition as well. So there's a very robust amount of science and research going on as part of that monitoring program, as well as the grow out trial.
Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate that. And I think it's such an important part of this activity is it is only 3 years, it is research. The monitoring is not just about compliance, the monitoring is actually about the research itself and what it is we're doing there in the first instance. And we're looking to make sure that this information is, as I said, transparent, publicly available and accessible, should there be questions or should there be interest more broadly. Next slide, please, Leslie. Another part to this, as I just touched on there around transparency and participation, sits around the governance for this particular trial. The Blue Economy Cooperative Research Centre already has a very strong governance arrangement that sits around our science and our research. We've created something for this particular trial that it brings in others as well, including people that are not participants of the CRC. There's 3 different components to this. Our trial site research and operations working group, which are our participants who are providing operational support like Scredding and Tassel. Some of our other funders like FRDC in conjunction with the Blue Economy CRC who are funding this from that research angle. Plus we're establishing a research and technical advisory group which will have a chair, Indigenous representative, fisheries and aquaculture representatives, and then technical experts across engineering, wildlife, retail safety, for example. Government representatives from many of the agencies that have sat behind this study or help support its development or have roles in the future potentially should it actually be a successful study. Our management team, our leadership team, and our scientific advisory committee. Plus, what I think is really exciting is we're also establishing a community advisory group, and expressions of interest will be out shortly, where we're looking for people with skills and experience across local council, Indigenous. We're creating a project cultural navigator, fisheries peak, recreational peak, aquaculture peak, ENGOs, and we'll be providing secretariat and also having support from the Griffith University ethics team. We have also invited the Cradle Coast NRM crew to be able to nominate an individual who can also be part of that community advisory group. And I really like that ability to adapt and make sure that we've got the right people around that table. Next slide, please. So right now we have just concluded a series of coffee drop-ins and community sessions that we held at Burnie Surf Lifesaving Club over the last couple of weeks. They've been really successful. We spent probably roughly an hour with each individual who has popped in over that period, as they've asked a variety of questions and really wanted to get to know either the trial site or the proposed activity in more detail. This information is available on our website, and that consultation closes on the 30th of September. This is the last of the community online sessions as well. So what we'll be undertaking as we move forward is one-on-one meetings or following up should people have questions. So if you're on this meeting and you've got specific questions while you've got all of us, I'll say jump in now and you can ask that. Otherwise, if you are looking to just fill out a have your say, I encourage you to do that as well. Next slide, please. This is a QR code. If you've got your phone there, you just put that on and have a look. That should jump straight to the have your say. Next slide, please. Yeah, we'll keep it at that. Thank you so much. So before I open up for questions, Sam and Simon, I'm starting with you, Simon. I was just going to see if there was anything you wanted to add at this stage of the session.
Thanks, Ange. I think that's actually been very comprehensive. I'll look forward to seeing if any questions come forward that we can help answer.
Thanks, Simon. Sam, from your perspective.
No, I think we've got better at delivering that the more practice we've had, Ange. So we're remembering the things that we need to say. So I think that was actually probably the most slick and best one we've delivered. So well done.
Yeah. I feel like I'm going to watch this video as well and go, oh, look at us. That's great.
Yeah. Happy to answer any questions, though.
Yeah, let's see if there are any questions. We've got plenty of time. So any questions from those who are online, jump in now with the Q&A. Just fill that out and we can go from there. Just wait a moment in case someone has a question. Well, off the back of that, I'm going to call it no questions today, which is excellent. Thank you so much for joining us and spending some time getting to know this activity, this proposal. And I really look forward to what's next. So thank you, Sam. Thank you, Simon. We'll call it quits tonight.